Well, today I'm going to talk about the crossroads of profit and philanthropy. Some say that to know where you're going, it's good to understand where you come from. My background is business. That's where I've learned how to build shrink ray guns, take over the world, and steal the moon. Well, that's not really where I'm from, and that's not what makes me happy. Well, at some point it must have, right? I come from humble beginnings. I started working at 13, put myself through college, and started as a young engineer at a Fortune 200. Within the first 7 years of my career, I climbed the corporate ladder after building so many companies within the company. And in late 99, I decided that it's time to go on my own. I decided to leave that corporate comfort and strike out as an entrepreneur to build my own businesses. Life as an entrepreneur has been fun and rewarding. We have built and sold so many startups since. In the same 7 years of that I was climbing the corporate ladder, I got married and I had 3 kids. And based on the look on your eyes, I'm thinking, how do these things come together? Well, as a father, I wanted to give my kids great morals, values. I wanted to teach them some good skills and good character. I started to notice that they're growing up very differently than I have. And some of the key ingredients that were key for my upbringing were missing. So I started to look for ways to find, a solution for these discrepancies, which one day landed us as volunteers at a food bank, a local food bank here in Plano. The volunteering experience was so amazing for the kids, but it had transformed my life. What I found, that in the US, we have a large-scale hunger problem. 1 in 6 Americans, that's over 50 million people, go to bed hungry every night. Like many others, I thought that hunger is something that happens outside of this country. Now, 17 million of these are kids. That's 1 in 4. And that's a big, big, big problem. So here's where my entrepreneurial skills come in, my tendencies to solve problems. I started looking at all these social problems that we have, from hunger, clean water, disease, etc. And I started looking at what solutions we have today to solve them. And what I found, that we all rely on nonprofits. While nonprofits are great at trying to solve problems, none have solved the problems they've been built to solve. The question is why? That's because a lot of them, or all of them, struggle with key ingredients that don't make them sustainable to solve these problems. First, all nonprofits depend on the generosity of the community or corporate donations. That means they can never get enough money to scale. When they get the money, we start scrutinizing how they spend the money. So if they spend it on more marketing to attract more funding, like more businesses do, we call them inefficient. That's capital inefficient, wasteful, not focused on the cause. And lastly, a lot of these organizations depend on an army of volunteers. That's to fill the gaps of budget and workforce. So, how many volunteering hours did you volunteer in the last month? So in conclusion, I don't believe that nonprofits can solve or grow to be sustainable to solve these problems that they're addressing. In contrast, business depends on their product to get profitability, which leads to sustainability, to scale, and to a very reliable workforce. Let's look at clean water as a problem. There's close to 1 billion people around the globe that don't have access to it. And yet, with all the nonprofit efforts, we haven't been able to solve it. So, what would happen if we challenged one of the big 3, like Nestle, Pepsi, Coke, to go deliver clean water to a specific part of the world? I'm willing to bet that they will deliver bottled water to everyone at a profit more efficiently than any municipality or nonprofit could do. That's because they have the supply chain and infrastructure in place to do so. Last year alone, one of my favorite snack companies delivered chips to more than 5 billion people around the world in their local flavors. Most of these countries that they were delivered to are the same countries that struggle with clear water. So the question is, why haven't these companies done anything? Why haven't they solved this problem? And that's where my stealing the moon days reminded me that it's all about self-preservation and making the biggest bottom line possible. So I guess delivering clean water is not as profitable as delivering those curry chips. So this is where my transformation began, and I started looking at how to build a business that can solve one of these issues, hunger. I believe that the solution to our social problems is actually through business and not through charity. It's through the intersection of business and philanthropy, which I call social consumerism. Social consumerism is when the cause becomes core to the business. For example, I think you've all heard of Tom's shoes, 1 for 1. You buy a shoe, somebody who's shoeless gets a shoe, which opens an opportunity for them to go to school or go to work, and Tom's makes a great profit. And now this model has been so successful that they took it to selling coffee, selling glasses, and more. Another example is a company like TangoTab. When you eat, they eat. It's a mobile application that gives consumers free dining deals at local restaurants and donates a meal to feed a person in need every time you use an offer. The restaurant gets traffic when they need it. TangoTab makes a great matchmaking fee, and a hungry person eats. So, social consumerism creates a win-win-win model. That means the consumer gets their needs met, the business gets profitability, and a social cause is solved. Social consumerism is very different than the current business models, where only the first two objectives are met. Social consumerism takes away the donation responsibility away from the consumer and ties that to an action that we do anyway. Going to eat, feed somebody else. Buying a shoe, puts a shoe on somebody else. This model is so powerful that in the US alone, with TangoTab, we eat 1 billion meals in restaurants every week, while we have 50 million hungry Americans. Just by tying a cause to something we do anyway, the math is simple. We can solve hunger. Moreover, what's very important for businesses is doing good is very contagious. We now know that 92% of mothers and 88% of millennials will buy or recommend the product if it's attached to a cause. That's how a business becomes a movement. And that's where the human desire for connection makes that business soar. So, I want you to take a second and think about every product that you consume every day. Now imagine if we tied each of these products to a cause. By tweaking the existing business models, we can effectively solve all of our social problems. And just imagine how the world would look like if we did this. Together, we can change the world. Thank you.